All right, we're live. Good afternoon or good evening, good morning, where you might be around the world. This is Ted Tagami with Magnitude on what are we calling now Magnitude Live. This is number 6. Yeah, the world's in kind of all in it together here. We have a global pandemic and forcing a lot of us at home, educators, parents, students, administrators. What are we doing with our kids while they're stuck at home? Well, we need some help, actually. We like to do stuff in space. We have our next mission scheduled to go to the International Space Station. Here, it's actually now still up to debate. We're looking either at a mission on a Northrop Grumman flight in August or maybe the SpaceX mission in October. We're still working that out with our flight provider. But we do send up 2 missions per year, and we need your help on this one. And this is actually a really easy and fun mission. I guess I should share a little background. Exolab is a device that we send up to the International Space Station in which we're running plant biology experiments. And we are just now concluding mission number 7, which is on the space station now. It's in its flight bag, ready to come home in just about a week and a half. When it splashes down in the Pacific, we'll be able to do any type of research back on the ground for what's happened up there. Well, an extension of that experiment is coming up here with the next flight, in which case we're going to be flying a plant with a bacterium, and that's going to be interesting for us in that there's a symbiotic relationship between these plants, and this bacterium. And it looks like Mr. Wilkinson's joined us just in time. So, Michael, because this is I'm broadcasting live via YouTube and Facebook today, that would be good to give an overview of the Leguminate Challenge and how we got there. So, brief introduction with Magnitude about our experiments we run in space. I should note that this is open to students around the world. Now, the time may not be appropriate for our friends in the UTC time zones like Europe or in Africa. So this will be recorded for them. But we do have schools in Kenya and in South Africa and in Germany that are currently in our program, as well as a lot of schools here in North America. And just recently, we had a school from Osaka, Japan join us as well. So if you're here in the United States, welcome. Come join us in this amazing fun challenge. Not a lot of work. We're trying to have more fun. But if you're really an ambitious sort that wants to do a little research, you can actually push the very edge of discovery as we think about things like astrobiology, life beyond Earth, growing things on different planets, and perhaps, which I hope really probably most important, we're also thinking about how we may be able to produce crops here on Earth that can handle things like, let's say, brackish water, or water that might not be pure but have some salt in it, or perhaps drought-tolerant plants, or plants that can produce a more prodigious output in a shorter period of time with less resource. But we're focused on a very specific type of plant, and for that, I want to turn it over to Michael Wilkinson. Michael is our lead educator for our missions, and we're talking about now Mission 8. So Michael, if you can, maybe introduce yourself, what you do there in New York, and about our Mission 8, what we got coming up with this symbiotic relationship between this microorganism and the plant.
Sure, Ted. Hey, everybody. You're talking about the having fun or maybe going to the whole thing. This project, and I'll get into exactly what it is, but it's a low floor, high ceiling project. You can really take this as far as you want to go, or approach it very simply. The main thing is we want people to engage and really have some fun with it. Back in February, we launched an experiment to the space station with cowpeas and their rhizobium symbiont. And what we were looking to find out is if the symbiosis between these two organisms, legumes and the soil bacteria rhizobium, if they can function as they do on Earth in the conditions of microgravity and elevated carbon dioxide and elevated temperatures, all the issues of the International Space Station's environment. This is the only real way that we get nitrogen into the food system. None of us, no animals, no plants, can fix the nitrogen in this atmosphere that we constantly swim through. And we rely on these microorganisms in the soil, and the rhizobium is one in particular that it joins up with a legume, and the bacteria infect the root system of the legume. They go through a whole reaction, a really interesting genetic change and immunological response between the plant and the bacteria. And once that infection is happened, it actually changes from being pathogenic to symbiotic. And the bacteria take the nitrogen from the atmosphere and convert it into ammonia that then can be assimilated as nitrates and nitrites by the plants. And they can use that to build the essential amino acids that every other living form of life needs to create the proteins that make us all living things. Then in exchange, the plant is sharing some of the carbon compounds that it's producing through the process of photosynthesis to the bacteria, and as well as some of the trace minerals that the plant is pulling up through its root system that is dissolved in the water. So it's a completely interlinked relationship between these two organisms. Neither one can fully complete their life cycle without the other. The real benefit of this in terms of agriculture is that once all those nitrogen compounds are in the body of the legume plant, when it decomposes, it returns those nitrogen compounds directly to the soil, and they can be used by other plants that don't perform this symbiosis, that are nitrogen intensive to grow. Nitrogen is the greatest limiting factor of all nutrients to life. Thank you, Tony or Ted, who threw it up there. So it's a real simple version of the nitrogen cycle. So we've got in the biggest of those regions, the soil. All this is really happening in the soil. So we've got our nitrogen from the atmosphere coming in, the nitrogen fixing bacteria. It shares that with the plants. Animals consume the plants, or the plants die. We have the animals that die, their feces and urine. All that gets recycled back through a whole host of other microorganisms called the decomposers and detritivores. And then those get looped back in through the plants and the bacteria. So it's a really elegant cycle. Now, in terms of the biochemistry of it, it is really sophisticated. And if you want to go into that, it's actually really cool. These are gram-negative rods for those that are into bacteriology. They have a flagellum, which means they're motile, so they can actually move through the soil. And the plant sends out some hormones into the soil that basically attract the rhizobium to it. So there's actually communication between these two organisms. So it's a pretty cool relationship. So we sent our cowpeas up, and that was flight 7. It just ended a week or so ago, and we're looking to repeat that experiment. We are putting a call out there. Should we fly cowpeas again? Or maybe there's another legume that you would like to see us fly. And that's where we really need your help. We're kind of crowdsourcing this and getting people's opinions as to which of these legumes should we be flying and why. And it could be something as simple as you like the way the plant looks. You like the seeds. You like to eat products from that plant. So we have in this small thumbnails of images, we have azuki beans, alfalfa, that must be cowpeas. No, that's not cowpeas. That is, I'm not sure which that one is.
Go team chickpea.
Clover, cowpeas, green peas, lentils. Oh, those must be chickpeas. Yeah, Lauren. Mung beans and soybeans. So those are the legumes that we have already running. But if you feel like, wait a minute, you've forgotten one of the most important legumes, or this, we really think that astronauts would want this one on board the space station or on a lunar or Martian colony, make a case for it, and we will definitely consider it. Could be, crayon drawings, could be poetry, could be a recipe, could be anything that makes it meaningful for you and or your students. And through this platform, you can share your ideas. We've got some curriculum available to you to use. that while we're all remote schooling, ways of getting your students actively engaged in authentic research. So really we're at the base of experimental design of basic research.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, it's a great overview. What we've done here with our Flight 7 and Flight 8 and our future flights is our teachers join us in our missions, and we have a weekly teleconference call because our mission has concluded and we just opened up this new experience, and now there is no cost. It's free to register. As Michael's mentioned, it's very easy to get started. Low ceiling, or low floor, high ceiling is what you
Low
said?
floor, high ceiling.
Yeah.
I
And
happened to
so,
be before this meet. This is why I was a little bit late. I'm just using. So this is a deli container that I think our favorite restaurant is doing these amazing family meals for $45. It's like I can't go to the store and buy the stuff and cook it for $45. But so he always puts hummus and tzatziki in these. So I've just washed this out, sterilized it. I made a media with water and Knox gelatin. I've crushed up some fertilizer pellets. It's still hot, so I need my gloves. Fertilizer pellets in there for nutrients, and I'm creating a culture dish. I'm gonna pour about 100 milliliters of that media in here, let it gel, and then I'll set some seeds in there and have them grow so that I can see how some of these legumes function and how they work.
now you might have a question, and I guess we should be looking at the YouTube channel on this. If you have questions, please write them in the comments. And if anyone's joining us here on the inside, we call it the backstage pass. If you're an active teacher, you get to join us on the backstage here and share the experience firsthand with your, the kind of extraordinary times. You're no longer in that classroom with the desks out there, whether you're a student sitting there with your teacher, whether you're the teacher there working with your class. And so now with this disruption, let's find a new way to engage in a fun way. You might have internet access with your students, maybe you don't. So what we're trying to do here with this concept of, I really like what you said there, Michael, low floor, is that really using your imagination and communicating however best you can with your students under the current state you're in. First of all, we'd like to hear what state that is. Do you need some help in that respect, or how's that coming along for you? Is it working the way you were expecting? What challenges do you have? So this call is kind of an introduction to what we're doing with what we call the Leguminaut Challenge, helping us find our next candidate plant to send to the International Space Station this fall. But it's also a chance for us to build community and to share resource and understand maybe some of the challenges we're facing, which is an important thing to acknowledge and recognize. And if anything, I think what we're doing here is building some hope and aspiration. And your students here, whether they're 8 or 18 or even 88, if you're out there and you're a DIY, right?
Team Clover!
Citizen scientist, please get involved. Share them with your grandkids or share them with your children. And parents, you might be watching this. It's like, oh my gosh, they've got the 2 hours a day, but I still got to get my work done. I've got my teleconference going, I got my report due and what have you. Or maybe you just, you're having another half a bottle of wine because it's one of those days, and that's okay too. But we're here to just kind of say we're out there. We keep on moving forward. We believe the International Space Station. We want to give a big shout out to the U.S. National Laboratory. Without the U.S. National Laboratory, they're on the space station, making life better here on Earth. Organizations like Magnitude.io would not have an opportunity to be able to join in the group. And so we're really grateful for them. And there's many other amazing experiences on the International Space Station. In fact, if you're looking for additional curriculum to do, this Friday, we're going to be joined by an exogeologist as we explore gardens on Mars and what that might portend for the future. But we've had just in the last few weeks some amazing sessions with Dr. Richard Barker from the Gilroy Lab and Dr. Joy Amasa from NASA, the Veggie experiment on the space station. So we're getting some really world-class folks that really know their field of expertise, and they're here to perhaps spark some curiosity in your mind, young or old, and engage us and help us to figure out what our next experiment will be. So do join us, and please send your questions in via YouTube. So can we maybe dive in a little deeper about these different legumes and what we think some of those challenges might be for us. We can talk about our laboratory if you think that's important, what we see here on Earth. And maybe that's a good way to go. And see,
I want to just jump in there. Lori did Lori Schreiber, who's on here, did a survey of her students. 97 students said, "Go Clover."
Uh-oh.
Wow.
Uh-oh, jumping in already. Lori, jump in.
Extraterrestrial trifolium.
Oh, you're on mute there, Lori. Here, I'll unmute you. Hold on one second. Oh.
Wait, we
still on
can't
mute.
hear you.
Yeah.
Hold on, Lori. There you go.
Okay, there we go.
Awesome. Hey, Lori.
Hi, so I have a possible 690 kids all online doing distance learning right now. And 97 have responded, and 52% of those said Clover, and they had some reasons.
What were some of their reasons?
Well,
Well, let
tipping
me
the
share
scales
my
already.
screen
Oh my
here.
gosh.
Just a second, let me share screen. Share screen, share. All right, so get rid of that one. Come on.
Yep, we can see.
Well, hang on, I gotta switch it. I am not good at this share screen thing.
No, you're
yet.
doing fine. We got your screen.
Yep.
So
Through
just
practice,
get the
we
window
get
up
better.
if you want.
How do I unshare it so I can get it back to? Oh shoot! How do I unshare?
I'll tell you what, maybe I can, I'm going to end you.
Okay,
for now.
do.
Okay, now you can restart it.
Thank you.
Hey,
Get rid
if
of
you're new
this.
to Zoom, by the way, or you're on YouTube and you want to use Zoom, we're all learning how to use it. You know, when you don't be inhibited by the fact you haven't really used it much or whatnot. If you want to come join us in the backstage sessions here, just make some comments on YouTube, share with us what you're up to. We'd love to have you come in. If you need a little primer on Zoom, we can help you out the best we can. Anyway,
Okay,
Laura,
let's try this again.
On the note of Zoom,
yes.
if you're a teacher that's been using this over the last couple of weeks to facilitate classes, Zoom just released an update at midnight last night about enabling the waiting room for students, because there were people that were like Zoom bombing into people's classes virtually.
Uh-huh.
So it's super easy to use, but you have to like allow the students in. Nice, because I take roll.
There you go. That's important. That's a good thing to state. And we might even have a little session talking about how to work in a classroom environment that's now new. Christine, you know, I imagine you have a lot more expertise than I do for sure about that.
It's been interesting, and it's all how you facilitate it. You can facilitate it and make it just as seamless as being, you know, doing a lecture in class, which I hate. I use YouTube for my lectures, but now the kids are like, we don't want to watch a YouTube lecture. We want you to do it. So,
Oh, there you go. And
All
what's
right.
nice about the backstage here, Lori, I guess Lori will jump in and describe her results, is that it's a limited, not everyone can see that URL. So that's good. But what do we have here,
Great.
Lori? What did your,
Can you see my screen there? It says
Yep.
I kept the data of which leguminate that they wanted to choose. I did a Google form survey for kids. So we have 52.6 said that they would like to see clover, and they had some reasons. Somebody added in coffee beans. I don't think they were aware that's not a legume. They were looking at the fact that the rest were beans. So
Laurie, can I ask you to zoom in a little bit? See if you can.
sure. Let me see here.
Do Command plus.
There you go.
awesome.
There you
Our old eyes. Thank you.
You want to slide that out?
Wow, look at that runaway favorite.
Well, hold on now. This has just, the horses have just left the gate there, Michael. Slow down.
No, but I'm looking. Do I see a Dookie on there anywhere?
None of the kids voted.
Oh,
for
there it
that.
is, a little bit.
It was in the list. Just a second. Let me see if I can
Yeah,
pull
I
up.
think they just need to learn a little bit more about some of these other legumes. That's what I
Yeah, there you go. So let me see. It keeps getting in the way. Let me see if I move this over.
Ooh, I like Travis's response.
Yep.
What did try.
So here is the actual. Let me go back to questions. This is how I set it up.
Okay.
So I set it up. If you got to choose
Oh, that's interesting. That's also the
for
first one
space
on the
station, what
list.
goes up next, they're familiar with the ExoLab project.
Mhm.
So I gave them a picture of each and just a little bit of background of each one. Then I gave them a space for or you could choose other. And Google tallies it all for you, so it makes it easy. And then I just wanted to share some of their other responses here. Let me zoom this out just a little bit. So I also asked the 4th and 5th graders, I gave them a task of things to do. One of them was to do the survey, and the rest was to take one final look at a video I made of our Exo Lab, which I brought home.
Okay.
And then if you could send anything to the ISS, what plant would it be? So these are a capture of some of the responses. It would be the mint plant because it smells good. And we had talked about how things smell different on the space station and they're kind of trapped in their own air. So I'm aware of where some of these answers came from. I would grow wasabi because I love sushi. And we had talked about how the NASA food labs add extra spice to make things have a little more flavor. I just had fun reading their different answers. If I could grow a particular plant, it would be oats because humans can eat them in oatmeal and other foods, but livestock can also eat them. So if you needed to bring livestock on a mission, both the humans and animals would receive food. So they're looking ahead towards eventual Mars. They keep emphasizing that they are the Mars generation. It would be avocado because avocado helps if you have a stomach ache and feel nauseous, because usually if you're on the National Space Station, you feel nauseous. We had talked about how one quote was 85% of astronauts end up feeling nauseous while they're in space with your inner ears trying to get used to it. It would be spinach because I like spinach and it's delicious. I would try to plant a 4-leaf clover because I'm really lucky. So being elementary kids, there's all kinds of different answers. I like this one. The plant I would try to grow on the ISS would be an aloe plant because I know that they can survive in very hot conditions. We talked about our Exo Lab being overheated. I also know that some plants and some parts in space are very cold, so I would want to see if that would change it. So they kind of had a dual purpose for their choice.
And we could always make tequila.
There you go. I would choose arugula because I love the taste of it. I like this one too. It would not be a flower that has to have a lot of sun to grow. It would be a night flower that can survive in the dark because they were aware of being locked in the rocket for extra amounts of times and how that affected the plant growth of what we saw.
Oh, Lori, that's a good point. So if you can reprise for us what happened with ExoLab 7 as we were ready to get and launch to the space station.
Well, with the ExoLab 7, we had set up our classroom lab, or I should say I did, because we were on winter break. So I set it up and took it back to class. And so we had normal stems, but the kids noticed the ones on the space station were elongated and thin and didn't have as much green to them. So we talked about, well, why is that? And that plants, will keep reaching for the sunlight, trying to get out of the soil. So they'll keep stretching, trying to reach light somewhere. And so that's where that comment had come from.
Right. We were basically, our launch was delayed twice. And so we were on the pad there and our plants were wanting to grow and we were hearing gravity. And so etiolation. The plants were growing up towards what they thought was opposite of gravity, looking for that sunlight. And they got really thin and long. And so that affected the experiment a little bit. And that's interesting that your student made that comment about dark. So I love that. Here our students are getting creative and imaginative. Lori's school district is fortunate enough to have connected students so they can log in and take these activities. If you're challenged communicating with your students, I would love to hear about it. I know our team would here at Magnitude to think about different ways in which we can share these experiences in this fun investigation of what legumes should we send. Now, many of those comments we were hearing at the end from Lori's class were more about if you could send anything to space, which may be a future experiment, but we also want to just get them to imagine and be creative and really to be a part of this. So I think that was really good value. What you have there, Michael? Oh, you're just opening up.
I'm just making notes.
Wonderful. And so again, I think because some of you might be seeing this for the first time, I should probably explain ExoLab in a little more detail. Now, ExoLab is not required for the mission, this challenge that we're giving you and your students, your parents and you and your children. And ExoLab is a device that really connects to other schools around the world and connects to a primary experiment aboard the International Space Station. If you're familiar with intermodal transportation, you know that 40-foot container on the back of the truck or on a rail car, on a train, or on a ship. That 40-foot container enables us to send something anywhere in the world for just a few $1,000s. Quite remarkable. And I think our modern civilization is really, if it wasn't for intermodal transportation, it would be much different than it is today. Well, intermodal transportation for today in space is in blocks called cubes, of course, a 10-centimeter cube or 4 inches on a side. And if we can build experiments within these types of volumes or variations of this, maybe like this would be a 1U 4-inch cube or 10 centimeters, 2U, 3U, etc. If you can build it in that form factor, it really is like intermodal transportation for space, that 40-foot container on the back of the truck, in that it's very easy to load up and you can get it anywhere. In this case, getting it aboard the International Space Station. What we found here is if we can run a single experiment, which is usually prohibitively expensive for any individual district or school, let alone a teacher or class, we can then activate that across schools around the world. And we're really lucky to have schools joining us from Kenya and South Africa, schools in Europe, here in Germany, in Canada, and most of them here are domestic in the United States and its territories. The laboratory itself, here, I'm just going to unplug it. And this one is pretty much the end of its experiment. It's kind of gone over, but so here is the lab itself. And if you imagine, this is a 2U equivalent, as you can see there. And inside it has an instruments that are measuring the atmospheric environment in here. It's temperature and relative humidity. It's light levels and carbon dioxide. It captures an image once an hour. So we can look at what's happening with our plants here on Earth. Well, our sister plants are on orbit on the International Space Station. We can get an image of what that looks like. So on one side in your classroom environment that's now free to access, you can see what will be happening with the primary experiment. In this case, for our trials, it'll be a ground experiment because our mission isn't on space right now, but we're going to be trying to find the right plant that we want to send up there and the plants that might be growing in a classroom environment. We don't need that for this experiment. What we need is your imagination and your creativity of why a particular legume is the best one to select from. And so it's really pretty open-ended. What different ways we can do this? C, you and I were chatting a little bit earlier today. C is the project manager for this, this mission, and we're really kind of building it ad hoc, if you will. But C, if you're on, there you are. Why don't you share a little bit with us this kind of formatting as we're evolving it? We need your help in also thinking about how we might want to set this up together. We literally are building the bridge as we walk across it. We understood there was going to be a pretty big disruption in formal learning settings, and we want to do something fun and engaging. Build a little community, a little place where we can all just kind of hang out and have a fun mission of doing something in space together. So see, as we're formulating this idea, what are some things that we're looking to do right now?
Yeah, thanks, Ted. Hey, everyone. So we have some cool lessons that are out now, and thanks for everybody for getting your students all engaged. Laura, I love your students' excitement and everything they're thinking about. I think that's exactly the direction we need to be going with, really getting students' imaginations in there, and like also thinking like adding it to like, well, what are the specifications of the space station? Like, what are the challenges of growing in space? And like maybe getting some of that sort of research and reasoning behind selecting candidates sometimes, you know, and if you just like peas, then I'm team green pea. Then getting creative around that. But we're kind of looking at, Ted, do you mean like how are we doing submissions or?
Yeah, as we think about learning about the different processes, if we want, we can even pop up if you want to share our classroom environment. And I don't know if Tony, if you want to actually show people how we might want to log in, but let's talk about the content first and then how easy it might be to access second. Let's get right into the meat of it. So if you do have technology for your students, we have all these lesson plans available online. You can assign these lessons to your students. You can track their progress. You can get their feedback. And I think what we're going to do right now is we have a quiz element that's built into our platform. And we're going to convert that quiz element to a voting system in which you can have your students vote, if you will, for the legume of their choice. And then you as an educator or as a parent, or if you're maybe an individual student in high school and you really want to do this research on your own, I guess you get a pretty big vote. But just relay that vote back to us and then we'll be able to record it. But beyond that, I think we're kind of open-ended on how we're going to have people register their other content and building these portfolios of ideas to support, whether it's Azuki beans or split pea or what have you, right? It's funny how I left clover out. Oh, clover too. Oh, there's friendly competition going on here. I can feel it, right? So, see, what do you think about at how would we want to see, what type of content would we like to see, and what questions might you have for our teachers in terms of getting that content to you?
Are those clovers, Michael?
Yeah, how pretty.
Nice.
There you
And tasty too.
go. Hey, Scott.
Yum. I make a lovely salad.
Mm.
Should I share my screen right now for
Sure.
the lessons, or
Yeah.
okay? You mentioned that. Oh man. Okay. Sure. All right. Do you see what I'm seeing?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So these are our legumina lessons, and this is a sort of overarching plan. We're thinking that in the first week, you get your students excited about the challenge, which like some of the teachers or our PIs have already started doing, and put your students in the perspective of how are we, like, what is going on? Like maybe we're doing interplanetary travel and we think about what we want to take to space. And as Michael was talking about earlier, legumes are very important within the nitrogen cycle. And so and we want to be able to fly one of these legumes on our space station flight for Exolab 8. And so maybe you tell your students, oh, we're running out of space. We need room for one like legume plant. I mean, we can talk about the our Exolab flights, but just sort of getting in a mind frame, like if I could only choose one plant and I needed to out of these, awesome legume candidates, which one would I pick? So we're kind of thinking about how we can finally get we have sort of teams forming around each of these legumes already. In some of the previous calls, we've lined up why, arguments for why each one is very cool. And we're also on Friday going to be talking a little bit more about some of the ones we left out. But maybe something like the way Lori was doing, where we have a form or a quiz inside of our lessons. That this is yet maybe a lesson that is yet to be created, but by the end of the challenge, your students will learn about the different legumes, learn about the nitrogen cycle, and then be able to say, which one do I want to send to the space station? And if you have a project that your students can work on, that like a creative project or a research paper, depending on the grade level you're working on, we would love to get like submissions or any form, like whether you email it to us or we can decide on maybe a blog or like ideal format or hashtag to submit your content.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. There's an opportunity for you to build engagement with your students in a fun way. You can use our platform, but again, not a requirement. And so if you just feel a little overwhelmed getting accustomed to this new reality here for this near term of your students being distant from you and you connecting with them, or your parent now kind of doing side duty as a teacher, I know as parents, we're all working with our kids with respect to learning, but now we're kind of taking that primary role, making sure they are getting their work done. I know how important it is, I think, for our students as well, not to be overburdened with work or tasks, but also just have a chance for them to be in a zone of comfort. And so again, thinking about how we can do this in a fun way. This is not a prescription for what should be done, but think about this as an enrichment program, a supplemental program to the other work that might be mandated by your district, or just things you want to make sure you're accomplishing before the end of the school year. So I would guess now that we're getting into the latter part of the year, all the things you might have learned before, or even if it's just a refresh or review that they might have learned a year prior, or perhaps it's a lead into what might be happening next year for them. This is a great chance for them to have an engagement that's really literally out of this world when we send the mission up. So let's have some fun with it and think about food, whether it's here on Earth or whether we're sending it even beyond, like to the space station or on the surface of the moon or on Mars. Now, Michael, maybe you can weigh in a little bit. There's so many different ways we can do this. We may not, our students or our teachers or parents may not have access to, if they don't have a garden, access to beans or any kind of legume to plant or start an experiment. So that's not a condition. Again, if they just want to think about design, be creative about maybe drawing a picture. I'd love to get some old school mail if someone wants to draw some art or what have you. That'd be neat. Poetry, your TikTok or your Instagrams. Space plant as a hashtag is a super simple one. And I'm just kind of ad hoc just saying that right now. We didn't do a vote on it. But how about we have a quorum here? How many space plant? Aye. Simple enough.
Or leguminate.
Yep. So if you just hashtag space plant, we'll pick it up on Twitter or what have you. And if you feel like you're on the edge, like, wow, they've already gotten started, they're already doing it, don't worry about that. We're going to work with you and your students. It's your own experience that you can make, right? If you do, or your students can get access to some seeds, they don't even need to be legumes. If you want to get to your younger students and it's just about life. If you're a parent and you have a garden and you're probably already engaging your students, find a way to connect to what this is and what happens when you remove the gravity vector from an organism that's used to growing it.
Older kids, maybe you can figure out a way to simulate that.
Yeah, right. Well, how might you do that? And so let's take and explore, if you will, and everyone weigh in on this, thinking about all the different ways we might be able to engage if we have or don't have access to any materials or tools. So anyone, feel free to chime in. What might you do, or what are you doing now to try to find a way to engage your students?
Well, we're lucky enough to have pretty much a one-to-one technology in our district. So it's easy to upload videos where I can film the one Exo Lab and show them what's going on with ours, or we can access the Exo Lab. Here's what I'm doing with first grade. We're doing the tomato sphere project, and we're doing one more material sent home. So I made for each of the first graders their own packet. So it has directions in our district, and it has the tomato sphere chart to track when their seeds germinate. And I've got a free color book page on tomatoes off the internet, which you could send home in an email, or if you had to pick up. And then I made an online tomato sphere word search. So these are first graders. But the kicker part is, rather than grow in our classroom, each student gets a baggie with 2 of the peat pods, and we taped 2 tomato seeds. This is the M set. They either get M or L, depends if they were in space or not. And we don't get to know that till the kids sprout their seeds. That way, students can do this at home, and they will just email or send me or through their Google Classroom their results. And so they're each doing this at their house, and I will collect the results. And I'm hoping for 30 or 40% of the kids actually send me their results. I know it's not going to be as 100% like it would be in a classroom, but they get something to grow at home, and this time they get to keep their tomatoes. We only did a few last year, so there weren't enough for each student.
Well, very good.
Lori, did you already get your seeds for this cycle?
I got them last fall, and I've been saving them. So this last year's seeds. So I'm sending those home. We talked about that for first grade or second grade, the teachers and I were talking about have kids get any seed they might have at home, and just to see if they can see those first leaves come up and identify the stem and the leaves, and maybe wash off the dirt and find the roots and things that we do in the classroom anyway. And they could do it with any seed they had at home, or vegetables they got at the grocery store last time they went, or
there you go. Yeah.
Do things that way. So
yeah, you think about cut and come again. You can grow something and trim it down and grow it over and over. So this is interesting, Lori, with your K through 5 kind of audience. Christine, you're working with high school students, so much different kind of experience. Share with us
a much different type of experience.
Right.
Sorry, go ahead.
So
What were you
share
gonna
with
say?
it. Yeah.
Oh, Lauren, I see that. Okay, interesting. Yeah, I haven't gotten I'm just reading Lauren's message. I won't be getting mine until this month, which is a little frustrating. So I teach high school and college, and we are in a district that is mostly one-to-one. But you know, high school, my dog's gonna photobomb.
That's okay.
In high school,
Aw.
you know, equity is such an issue. I think I'm not saying anyone's job is easier than anyone else's, because it is so hard right now.
Yeah.
You know, coffee consumption and alcohol consumption is greatly increased. And, you know, it's interesting because you really see, for some students, you see that they have this level of grit and developing maturation and developing study skills and learning to prioritize, which is what they have to do in the adult world anyway. So some of these kids are having to be faced with these adult skills the first time. And then there's kids that are like, oh my gosh, it's the exact same assignment, but I'm looking at a computer and I don't have a teacher there. So all of a sudden it's German. So there's, you know, this huge dichotomy between figuring it outedness and helplessness that's off the charts. And then you have kids that I haven't heard anything from. And that's interesting. So, you know, I also thought about like with our seeds, sending kids home with stuff. But we have to be so cognizant and conscious of the equity, and we can't make assumptions about kids all having equal access to anything. And you know, that just really runs into that issue. So one of the things that I'm trying to do just as much more than anything else is just to try and retain a human element to all of this, a flexible setting, but make things that are kind of adaptable. But you know, I don't think that this is the time to also throw all education out the window. It's showing kids that like we can use science as the platform to see the truth in so many things, including what's going on now. You know, us near Los Angeles, you know, kids can clearly see that the air is cleaner, and you know, we can look at NASA imagery and we can look at satellite pictures and we can do a time comparison. And you know, even in Google Earth, we can see like time lapses. So there's so much space technology that you can utilize during this time. So that's really one of the things that I'm doing. I would have loved to have had kids be able to do Tomatosphere at home, but I have kids that live in projects. And again, it's like having an access thing. And I have kids that are having to babysit siblings all day, every day. I had a girl in a Zoom meeting yesterday that had her little sister, you know, napping in her lap because she's got to watch kids. So it's interesting and challenging, really challenging. And as far as like our Magnitude experiment, we're trying to run that simultaneously with, we were getting ready to launch a high altitude balloon. We're doing the Mars student imaging project. So I'm trying to facilitate projects in that class. Chemistry is real interesting to do from a distance, let me tell you. But the Mars student imaging project, you know, they were at, if you're familiar with that project, they're at the place where now they have to propose their research. They've designed their research questions. So it's really just facilitating this discourse. And then, and the students are already like conveniently in a research project. So it's really more moderation on my part and guiding. And they're presenting their research to the Mars Space Flight Facility on Friday. And, you know, hopefully that'll go well. But I have found if you're not doing Zoom meetings with your students, my gosh, it takes so much time. I did 4 hours of it yesterday. I've got an hour tonight with my college kids, an hour tomorrow night with my college kids. I just did one with my PhD advisor. It's a lot, but the kids so appreciate it. And the ones that appreciate it the most are the ones that had their head down asleep in your class the whole time. Those are the ones that have been like, oh my gosh, I needed this.
Wow.
Of them are not getting any like human interaction at this point. It'll be an interesting sociological study when this is all over.
Yeah, it will. It really will.
Good point. And also, I think our animals love us so much more right now. It's like, you're home again. That's great.
Oh, God.
Oh, who's getting some love? That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we might be having to get a second one because he's like, you're here all the time. So, you know, now we must play all the time.
Did everyone notice that Laurie says she's got 10 spare sets? of tomato seeds.
Oh, that's wonderful. And so we should probably
Right.
mention that our Leguminate Challenge is not directly connected to Tomatosphere, but that is an amazing project. It's one of our colleagues, just like Liam is a colleague of ours with the Space Station Explorers on the International Space Station. What Tomatosphere does is they get a big packet, I think maybe 5 pounds of seeds, and they send them up in the payload, and they float around for about 30 days in microgravity, and they send them home again, and they have another 5 pounds of seeds that didn't go up into space, and they send you packets of each, but they don't tell you which one's been to space and which one hasn't. And the challenge for your students is to grow both of those and do measurements and observations and taking notes. And very similar in concept to what we have with Exolab. The difference here with the Leguminate Challenge is we have not yet flown a plant yet for this mission 8, and we need your help in determining which one we should fly. When we do send that up, you can be doing ground experiments with what is growing on Earth while we're doing it in real time. So it isn't a mystery. You know that this is growing in space in microgravity, and that's the difference as opposed to just sending a seed up and back. We're having that seed that's germinated, it's growing. We're looking for that symbiosis, that relationship between the rhizobia, because really legumes are fundamentally a green fertilizer. And if we look at a sustainable planet, we need to be thinking more about the holistic qualities of legumes and how they keep our soil fertile and producing at a high level without chemicals or other artificial things. You know, I don't know if anyone talks about the three sisters, but our Native Americans knew this with corn, squash, and beans. Growing them together created this nice, vibrant soil that was replenishable season after season versus you know, a row crop that you just grow until your soil is depleted. Then you throw a bunch of chemical fertilizer on it to pump it back up again. All we need is an image from space, from the International Space Station, of something like the Mississippi Delta to see that that is not sustainable when you look at the runoff into the Gulf of Mexico. You get the algae blooms that happen seasonally and whatnot. It's not sustainable. It's really great for production right now, but how are we going to feed 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 billion people on the planet?
That's a really cool thing. If you look at Google Earth, and one of the things I like to talk to my kids about a lot is the utilization of space technology on the environment. And Google Earth has a time lapse feature, and I have my kids do this whole project on social justice and satellites. They can do a time lapse function and go back in time because it's using MODIS satellites, and we've had MODIS and Landsat since 1976. So they have to actually investigate the swath, the temporal, the actual like dynamics of the satellite, and look at the imagery it's taken. And we've looked at the area of Katrina before and after, and you can see that. You can look at the Mississippi Delta. My kids even investigated Syria and learned all about the conflict in Syria through satellite imagery and the physical effects of war on the environment. There's a lot of cool studies you can do there, and all student derived.
You know, one folks, we might be able to try to get on Planet if we can get someone from Planet. Planet.com is a small satellite company. These are basically using these CubeSat 1U. There's 3 of them, and if you imagine their satellite is that size, imagine our Exolab at 2U, and this would be your optics, and this 1U would be pretty much your system bus for operating your satellite. Solar panels kick out. They have dozens and dozens of these in orbit. They launch them in what they call flocks, and these particular satellites are called doves. And what Planet has done is they're basically rostering the planet in real time close to the Earth. So you can, if you wanted to look at like the fires in California that we had, or migration of animals in the Serengeti, all these things are possible with this, as to Christine's point, with satellites in space, historical and present as well. So technology and what we're doing with space is absolutely amazing. And the International Space Station and other researchers and satellites in orbit gave us this keen look into something that I know when I was in school, you know, I had punch cards for the computer, right? So things have come now. We've got the entire world's knowledge in our phone here in our pocket. It's what's the right question to ask? And we think with the new, if public school is now homeschool, I mean, if we just accept that for the next 2 months, then I think it's okay to disrupt you know, outside the normal course of action, disrupt our thinking and realign to what is the best way to convey learning in a fun environment. Parents, you know, would love your feedback on this as well. teachers, I'd love to hear your challenges. We're hearing from some teachers now in terms of what they're doing. I know I have other teachers on here. Does who else is on that wants to weigh in on what the experiences they're having right now? Lauren, maybe, or Scott, Mike?
Yeah, so I mean, I can tell you, we've actually been doing the Leguminot Challenge as our class for the last couple of weeks. We are currently in the middle of week 3 of distance learning, virtual learning. Everyone's calling it something different. And so that was kind of going to be our plan when we came back from spring break, and then we never came back from spring break. So we've been using a lot of like Flipgrid and Padlet, so kids can still have those academic discussions back and forth. We are really lucky. Our kids are all one-to-one. They have a school laptop, and so that they had those available to them already. So lots of good discussions kind of going on about our current experiment, but then also look at some different qualities of the different legumes and trying to talk about which one would you want to go. And a lot of them are choosing things like chickpeas. Go team chickpea.
I think you're biasing.
I haven't even told them I'm on team chickpea yet.
Yeah, but
they are very much.
Has the information on each been presented in an unbiased way?
It has. But a lot of them are choosing them based on what they would taste like. Like, oh, I really like to eat this, and so I would like to eat this space. I bet astronauts would too. And so it's been kind of fun to watch them then have to go through that argument process of, okay, you want to fly that? Well, now tell me why, and back it up with some data. And so they're actually currently working on their different pitches and proposals.
There you go. And
I just want to interject there, Lauren. I mean, so this is my, if you've been around me, more than 10 minutes, you know that I'm a disruptor. But this is exactly what I tell people when I do consultancies. You just described about 5 NGSS standards. That's 5 in one activity. So you're meeting all of your curricular objectives, and that defending a case, making a hypothesis, defending a case, making an argument. That's one of those cross-cutting strands that are one of the hardest to meet. But here's the perfect place to do it so easily.
Yeah, absolutely. So our schedule we've completely changed our schedule from what it would be on a normal school day. And so kind of giving the kids room for some more grace. And we tried doing like hey, here's all your classes you would normally have on a Monday, and let's have all those classes today. And all of us, the kids, the teachers, everybody was completely overwhelmed and stressed out. And so luckily our administration said, okay, that's not working. Let's change.
Right. That's really smart.
Space those out a little bit, which has helped. And then tomorrow, my kids are actually planting seeds. And so I mailed seeds to all of them.
Wow.
And so some are getting cowpeas and some are getting tomato sphere seeds. And some, I had one student who was really gung-ho about wanting to grow some spinach. Spinach was on our list of things to grow. And so they've all proposed different experiments. They're all changing different variables. Just to kind of keep up that communication of, look, here's what I grew, or here's what I didn't grow. And I love Powerade. Do my plants love Powerade too? Let's find out.
Well, there you go.
mean, some of them are building planters out of water bottles, and some are building them out of Coke cans. And it's kind of hey, use what you've got. Don't try to order something online. Don't try to go to the store to get all these things. Just look around you. What do you have that will work?
Oh, there you go.
Exactly. I mean, this is, so you said out of a water bottle. And actually the Powerade bottles make great potters because the plastic is real rigid. But this is just a water bottle cut in half. The bottom part becomes the water reservoir. The top half is the actual pot. There's some a wick that goes through the cap into the potting media. And so that's supplying the water. It really makes a very easy way to grow it. And this is one of our cowpeas. And I've got some, I may have to send this to Graham, Lauren. I got a nearly mature pod there.
Nice.
So probably in a couple more days, that'll be ready to send down.
Now, Michael actually has in we've only been doing this for 3 weeks, and you're hearing from some of these teachers, and it seems like they've been moving along for quite some time. You can join us at any time. We can talk about what some of your unique challenges might be in your classroom. Michael actually has I'm gonna clip it out. We had a longer session, I think it was a week or two ago, about how to make one of these. And so let's trim that down to maybe a 3-minute video or 5-minute video with step-by-step instructions. So if you want to share that with your students, if you haven't already done something like that, really simple way, whether it's the Leguminaut challenge or not, right? Just getting something and getting them involved in really our laboratory is out the back door. It's in the side yard. It's in the front yard. Our laboratory now, since we have homeschools for our public school and charter and private school students that are having to stay at home, this is where our laboratory is. So grab a handful of dirt. If you can weigh it out, great. Measure it. I've got so many cubic, volume of dirt. If you want to be explicit about it, or maybe you just grabbing a handful of dirt and saying, what do I have in there? What kind of life? There's a little bug here, and Mike, do you have a microscope? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. You have a magnifying glass? Maybe yes, maybe no. What can you use with those tools? Can you just be keenly observing? Look at your plants in the morning and look at them in the afternoon. Why are they different? Right? Are they following the sun? Why is that? So I think we can reignite that and turn on all those senses in a way that we have the students turning off a little bit, because they are waiting for the next bell to ring, right? And they are looking at the next chapter in the book they've got to study for and prepare for that next test next week. And we've broken that cycle. So we can try to force them back in that cycle, which maybe that's being mandated by your district. But I hear from many teachers, and we've been working with teachers now for 7 years here at Magnitude. We hear from many teachers like, if I was only given that chance to do that thing I want to do. Well, guess what? You have that chance right now, right? It's time to be a little radical, but the most important thing is we're thinking about our students, and we're thinking about what their immediate needs are. It could be food scarcity. It could be safety at home. These are real concerns, something that Magnitude isn't designed to solve, but we can listen. We're people, right? And so we welcome and open everyone that's an educator. If you're a parent, you're dealing with what you need to do with your students here. I think we have some fun activities that can, if we're looking at the latest count of whatever that thing that's counting us to keep us anxious, I think there are other fun things that we can do to keep us occupied and bring us together as community. So please do not be hesitant to reach out. We're going to be getting some really amazing, cool people in here. And as you're hearing from some of our teachers, they're getting engaged and they're pretty excited as well. We've got a couple other teachers here. We're getting on the top of the hour, but I want to make sure if they have something they'd like to share. Scott or Mike, I know that you're in a district that doesn't have one-to-one. How's that coming along for you guys?
Go ahead, Scott. You want to take that?
Okay. Well, we're finally getting the computers out to the kids this Friday. We've been running around like crazy trying to see who's got a computer, who doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And then that leads right into spring break for us.
Mm-hmm.
But I did my first Zoom meeting today and I learned a lot.
Now, what grade are your students? To share it with us.
What grade? We're eighth grade kids. So I got
so what's that like? What was that first Zoom meeting like?
It was a little chaotic. It was fortunately Common Sense Media, you know how they send all that stuff. That day after that, they sent this wonderful thing. Parents, here's how to prepare your kids for Zoom meetings and stuff. So I zipped that out to my parent list and put it on my Google Classroom for the kids. And I'm probably gonna, what I'm probably gonna do is I'm gonna start making as part of the assignments, at least as a little extra credit, have a question for me. And then also have, because this was what, so I planned as a Q&A, and not many kids had Qs this time. So it was mostly going over a lot of the assignments that I've been assigning them that I've seen they having trouble with, and, going over and using the screen share and doing a lot of that, but I will probably focus more around objectives when we come back. But it's good to see the kids. The kid brought his dog, and I said, "Oh, that's cute." And, some of the kids have their own weird backgrounds, which are funny to see. So in a lot of ways, it's fun. You miss the interaction.
How many students did you get online today, Scott?
I would say I have to do an actual count off the chat. I would say about half of them came on.
Yeah.
So I feel pretty good about that.
It's really good. Distant learning for me has been very challenging. My name's Mike. I'm I got the camera off because I'm running around in the kitchen and gardening outside back and forth. But I was fortunate enough to have this Magnitude.io start a little bit earlier. So when we took our break, the students kind of had some prior knowledge to growing plants. And I think that's important right now, is building this prior knowledge in our students earlier on, because this distant learning is not going to go away. This is obviously something that's going to stick around for quite some time. And we're all, as educators, we're all just kind of starting, some of us are just kind of starting into this. But having that prior knowledge is really helpful. And my students right now, I have a few that I'm in contact with, and they're asking about their plants that we started. They're growing healthy at home, and the anatomy's there. I can mention some of the cotyledons have dropped off, and some of the primary and secondary, tertiary leaves are starting to grow already. They're excited to see maybe if it's going to flower or not. And these are middle school kids, by the way. And like what Michael was saying, it really goes with the NGSS standards, because these are cross-cutting concepts that are built inside the NGSS that these kids have to learn anyways. So what better way to do it than to grow plants? It's been part of our human culture for such a long time, and yet very little grade levels talk about plants. Very little. I've seen very little. But if you go down to elementary school, kids can make models. That's part of the NGSS standards. You can have them cut out leaves and put together a paper plant. There's plants all around. Kids can go outside. I mean, there's something that all plants have in common. And, students can be doing little research projects at home right now. Or if there's no plants at home, they can go down the street, pick one.
Yeah, and kids, if your parents aren't there with you, ask them before you start pulling plants out of the yard.
Oh, I'm sorry, kids. Yeah. You could find them at the grocery store then.
There you go. Yeah, if you can
Grab
get
a
to the
stock of cilantro or celery or something.
there you go. I want to be cognizant of everyone's time.
Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
No, Mike, thank you. In fact, I don't want to cut you off. If there's more you can share, please do.
No, I just want to know that the hardest part is getting the kids to be creative on their own. I think the challenge with our generation of students coming up now is like, they don't know what to do with themselves. You have to kind of give them ideas. And when you give them that idea, they really take off with it. I mean, they want to learn more about plants now, because I started this project, the Magnitude.io. Yeah, so it's just a bad timing for our school district, really bad timing. But thank you, Ted.
Oh, well, you're welcome. And we're here to help all teachers and school districts. You might have unique cases. Would you reach out to us? It's just hello@magnitude.io. We'll get back to you as soon as we can, and love to hear your unique challenge. And I think we can probably find a way to get you involved with something extraordinary, running missions aboard the International Space Station, right? In a very simple and easy engagement. Our team here with Tony, Michael, C, and our others that aren't on the line with us have an opportunity to work with you, and let's build some collaboration. This is just one of many experiments we've run. We expect to run more in the future as well. And so just being involved and engaged with the work that we're doing can also, if you've got a creative idea or you want to do some experiments or investigations, we can potentially lead to that as well. If you've got a good sound argument as an educator why we should be looking down that path. Right now, we're planning into the back end of 2021. So keep that in mind. This is a year out, 18 months out for us to really get these experiments ready to go. Right now, we have a shorter window, but we're being asked, especially by NASA and our flight providers, to kind of extend that horizon line, which gives us an idea more about how you might use the work in your classroom. We're learning from the teachers that are here with us today, and they're helping us make a better experience tomorrow. So we encourage you to reach out and share what you know. Everyone's got a kind of their own unique pedagogical approach to learning, and we'd love to hear your style and maybe some of the challenges you're facing and how you're solving that. So one thing I do want to share with you is if you're logged in or if you're watching this now, you do want to send if you haven't worked with us already, send an email to hello@magnitude.io, and we're going to send you a special backstage link to the Zoom session on Friday, this Friday. That's from 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, till noon Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern. And we have some interesting guests. A NASA engineer, Bill Brown. We're going to do a little bit of a different introduction there. He's going to be talking about a transcontinental balloon called a Sky Tracker. We're going to launch one of those every week starting next week. When we launch them from California, they usually get over the eastern seaboard, out over the Atlantic. Sometimes they get towards Africa or they're moving into Europe. And so we're going to be launching one of those every week. Your students can follow along with us as we learn about the Earth's atmosphere and weather prediction. So that's really a lot of fun. Zero cost for you, tons of fun for you and your students. Learn a little bit about solar power and communications and some other things. So Bill's going to join us at 8 o'clock. At 9, we're having, I believe at 9 o'clock, right, Michael? We have an exogeologist. Do you want to share a little bit more about who we have joining us at on the hour? Is it at 10?
Sure. We're really fortunate to have Dr. Ellen Stofan join us. She is a former science administrator for NASA. She's an exogeologist. She has done lots of planetary studies, and she's coming to talk with us about gardens on Mars, thinking about what the regolith is like, what we understand about it, and thinking about that in terms of, well, if we're going to colonize Mars, how can we convert that regolith into something we could grow plants in? So it should be really exciting. I have met her several times, and she's a really, a lot of fun to talk to. She's currently the administrator of the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C.
Wonderful. We're really looking forward to having Ms. Sofan with us, Dr. Sofan. And what I missed, actually, getting my schedule mixed up, we're going to have a teacher leading some of her students through a panel discussion.
Right.
That Lori Waters down in Florida. And she has some of her students, I think 4 or 5 students that'll be joining us in a panel discussion. We're going to have a follow-up with her students a little later, in which all students will be included in more of a YouTube session with, I think, 70 plus students. It's kind of hard to run a Zoom meeting. So we'll probably move that more towards a couple talking heads, but having that chat for communication there with her in a later episode. And then on the back end of that session between 9 and noon Pacific, noon to 3 Eastern on Friday, we have both Michael and C introducing our last 2 Legume candidates that we're looking to send to space with the right votes and support. So again, art, imagination, research, any way you would like to do it. You got some fun idea we haven't mentioned yet, would you send us a note? hello@magnitude.io. We'd love to hear from you, and we hope you're safe and everything's okay with you. And thanks for tuning in for this session today. We'd love to see you on Friday. So until then, guys, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you on Friday. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Take care.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Take care.